What we dubbed the biggest official visit weekend in BYU football history is just that. Now we look ahead to determine what's going to happen next for the BYU football program with their first commitment already in the bag.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, coming up on today's show, where we react to the weekend that was for BYU football in terms of official visits, intel I have been able to get, and also we talk about the first commitment of what hopefully will be a handful more in days to come. Then we're going to talk BYU basketball. AJ DeBonson continues to add to his resume on the international stage, and we'll finish up with another BYU basketball player, Jaeger Denman. It is officially his week as he gets ready to hear his name called in the NBA draft. We'll talk about the latest with him as we continue with today's podcast. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right in. The official visit weekend that we dubbed last week as the biggest official visit weekend in BYU football history is history. Now, what to make of this? Well, Ryder Lyons is going to obviously be the headliner as he will announce his commitment decision tomorrow. So get ready for that. We'll lay the groundwork for that on tomorrow's podcast to tease ahead to that. But he obviously is going to kind of make or break in many people's minds this BYU recruiting class. And I don't think it should make or break this class considering the caliber of athletes that BYU has already added. You look at the Brock Harrises, you look at just who they've brought in, Bob Mulatalo, etc., that have already committed to this program. In any other year, it feels like those would be absolute headliners, but it just so happens this year we've got a quarterback prospect who's considered by many to be one of, if not the best high school quarterback prospect in the entire country. Brandon Huffman, who I respect immensely from 24/7 Sports, said that very thing on my radio show, DJ and PK. He said that I believe that for my money, Ryder Lyons is the best quarterback in the 2026 recruiting cycle. So this is a hype train for Ryder Lyons that absolutely could be one that people kind of peg success or failure for BYU football on whether or not he picks BYU. But beyond that, BYU brought in a number of high-level prospects who have been absolutely sensational. Guys who otherwise, as I mentioned, probably would be the headliners of any given class over the past 5, 10, 15 years for BYU football. And they have got a bunch of them already committed or could be committing in the coming days and weeks. That's the nice part about this is BYU, I think, got an incredible blend from this weekend of guys who are already committed. I mentioned four-star prospects like a Brock Harris, like a Bob Mulatalo, Ty Getchie at tight end that have already bought into BYU that are going to be BYU Cougars, and then got a number of those high-level guys, including Ryder Lyons, Kauai Akana, Prince Williams, etc. Also, other prospects out there that BYU hopes that will be committing in the coming days. And the nice part is you get them kind of in that blended environment where some guys are already committed to the program, and they can essentially tell the guys, hey, come here and play with us. Be a part of this. Buy in to this football program and help us build something that's meant to last. We want to be Big 12 contenders for years to come, and that's why we need you. And I'm talking about any individual player out there. Now, obviously, there will be commitments in time coming out of this recruiting weekend. The biggest one, as I mentioned, Ryder Lyons tomorrow, but BYU didn't come away completely empty-handed coming right out of the weekend because Saturday night, Graham Livingston announced that he is going to be a BYU Cougar. Now, if you look at the recruiting rankings, Graham may be near the bottom, if not at the bottom of the individual rankings of these players, but do not let that make you think that he is like just this guy that's kind of an add-on and being thrown into this class. He's got family legacy with BYU. His older brother Hayden was a guy who walked on at BYU originally as a quarterback, then ended up becoming a very capable safety for BYU's defense. Well, Graham, he is going to be a scholarship player from day one at BYU, and he has proven that at Ridgeline High School up there in Millville, Utah. You look at his stats, 3,200 yards already in his high school career. And oh, by the way, he's still got his senior year to go. This is a kid who will easily, barring something unforeseen, pass the 4,000 yards receiving mark. And again, he has an outside shot potentially going to 5,000 yards if he has a monster season. But you look at his size, 5'11", $170 to $180, depending on the what website you look at, and immediately you conjure comparisons to that of Parker Kingston. Now, I will say this: Parker Kingston and Graham Livingston, in terms of body types, similar, absolutely. Because Parker Kingston, 6 foot, $190, very fast, obviously very good in the open field and the like as a return man, etc. But the one thing Graham Livingston has that Parker didn't necessarily have coming out of Roy High School, speaking of Parker, that a guy like Graham has, is he's a bona fide through and through wide receiver. Parker played a bevy of different positions in his high school career, most notably playing quarterback as kind of a dual threat guy his final year in particular at Roy High School. And he has really come into his own as a wide receiver. But there's also one other key difference, is that while both of these guys are fast, you're looking at a guy in Parker Kingston who I would say in the 100 meters probably runs in the high, 10-1s, high, maybe 10-2s. We're talking legit track speed. I'm not saying that Graham Livingston's slow, but he's obviously running a little bit slower at 10-6. Now, I can only dream of running as fast as either one of these dudes, and 0.4 seconds obviously is not going to make or break a kid, but I love the fact that Graham Livingston has got the bona fide credentials that he is just a true wide receiver. He'll probably come in, compete for playing time. I don't know if he has mission plans at this juncture, but if and when he shows up at BYU, I fully expect him to jump headlong in and be one of those polished receivers that BYU has become synonymous for. Yeah, maybe he doesn't have the physical prowess. You're talking about a guy you'd rather have, and obviously everybody wants this, a 6'4", 6'5", 210-pound guy who runs like the wind. Yeah, everybody wants that. But the nice part is BYU's history has been built on guys who do not match that prototypical size. You've got obviously those bigger receivers. You look at Chase Roberts, who's a legit 6'3" or 6'4", and you obviously have made hay with those guys. But at the same time, you've made a lot of hay with guys who are 5'10", 5'11", who are sure-handed and have proven themselves at every level of football they've played at. And that's what Graham Livingston is. So I love the fact that Graham Livingston's a part of this class, even if he may be one of the lowest rated recruits or commits to the BYU recruiting class this year. Doesn't diminish anything that he brings, because he's a bona fide 3-star athlete, and his history, speaking of his family, dad who played at Rick's College, a brother who walked on at BYU, ended up becoming a rotation player at a position that wasn't his native position coming out of high school. That indicates to me that Graham's got all the tools you like to have in your back pocket to come in and have success at BYU in the near future. So get ready. It could be a really, really newsy week for BYU, for better or worse, but it got kicked off with Graham Livingston's commitment, and the hope is that it's not stopping anytime soon, that BYU, I believe there were 9 guys by my count who were on campus this past weekend who were uncommitted, all of them 3 or 4, or in the case of Ryder Lyons, 5-star prospects. If BYU could grind out 4, 5, 6 of those guys, what a class it would be. I've talked about it before on this show that I believe this could be a class that is unlike any other in BYU football history in terms of the overall depth and prowess and the talent that it could possess. And the hope is that this week will kind of kick off a snowball effect of extra commitments, obviously headlined by Ryder Lyons, and we'll see where that goes on tomorrow when he announces his commitment. All right, coming up next, you flip over to basketball. AJ DeBonsa, he is officially representing Team USA once again, and he is getting compared to an I've got football in the brain, an NBA Hall of Famer. And the guy that made this comparison, he doesn't make up these comparisons just out of thin air. We'll explain exactly what it is and why it's something that's worth watching as AJ leads Team USA forward in the U19 World Championships. And we'll get into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys because summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is your best way to make every game more exciting. The best part is you're already following all of the action, obviously, as you're a sports fan. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the action and the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Think about that, my friends. It's the best part about this. The best part is it's easy to use. Speaking of FanDuel, it's fast to pay out and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. $5 get you $150 if that bet hits. Simple as that. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Once again, that's on the FanDuel app or on FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope y'all are doing well. Kind of a little story time before we get into the meat and potatoes of AJ DeBonsa. You notice the short shirt I'm wearing if you're watching this. It's kind of a greenish shirt. My sister perpetrated an absolutely hilarious prank. She got all of my brothers-in-law, my cousins, they're on that side of the family, and myself to wear the exact same shirt to a family dinner yesterday. Father-in-law was in on it. So, yeah, props. Did not mean to get, but here we are. So, obviously a fun time. That's why if you're watching this on YouTube, that's why I'm wearing a little off what I usually wear. It's a brand new polo, but hey, it works. It's comfortable. I'll probably be golfing in it for days and years to come. But nonetheless, kind of a funny little hijinks that was perpetrated yesterday by my sister-in-law. All right, let's talk about AJ DeBonsa, though. He has been officially named to the 12-man roster to represent Team USA at the U19 World Championships and FIBA U19 Men's World Cup. I say the World Championships. It's a World Cup format. There's 4 groups. BYU is grouped in Group D with Cameroon, Australia, and France. So obviously some stout competition. But AJ DeBonsa is expected to be the guy to lead this team forward. Now, there's some really, really high-level prospects and guys who are playing alongside AJ on this squad. JJ Mandaquit, a guy that BYU recruited once upon a time. Koa Pete, Tyron Stokes, who's actually a guy who's a year younger in terms of the recruiting cycle. BYU is going to be BYU fans, I should say, are going to be obviously very interested on how AJ and his team do in this. Now, this U19 Men's World Cup comes up later this week. It begins on June 28th, so later this week. I'm looking forward to seeing how AJ performs on the international stage. And that's where Fran Fraschilla enters the conversation once again, because he said this came out on, I'm trying to remember when it was, Friday, I believe. It might have been Saturday. He says, I'll try to create a visual for BYU men's basketball fans for what to expect from AJ DeBonsa after watching him all week at the USA Junior National Team under-19 practices. Here you go. Here's the kicker. Best description is that if Kevin Garnett came back as a small forward with his intensity, athleticism, and his team-first style, that's who the Cougars have. Okay, everybody. I am a guy who grew up watching essentially the entirety of Kevin Garnett's career. Obviously, he played in Minnesota, so they were off the beaten path a little bit. I'm a guy who's a Jazz fan, watch a lot of Utah Jazz action, but I like the NBA overall by and large. And Kevin Garnett was an absolute sensation. Obviously, later on in his career, went and played for Boston, won that title in 2008 with the Celtics, and he is a Hall of Famer. Anything is possible. Remember that after they won the championship in 2008. Obviously, it was a tagline for Adidas, who was sponsoring him at the time. But the bigger point is Kevin Garnett is one of the 10 best power forwards at very worst in NBA history, and you're telling me that BYU's got a guy at his caliber and AJ DeBonsa playing for them? Yeah, the hype train for BYU basketball, it's only getting bigger. It's only getting louder. I don't know where it goes, considering we're still 130 plus days out from the start of the BYU basketball season, and I continue to wonder, are we hyping up AJ just a bit too much? I do legitimately wonder that at times. And obviously there is concern that if we are overhyping him, that if he underdelivers, obviously people are going to want to throw stones at him proverbially. And that obviously would do nobody any favors. But the more I hear about this is that people who know far more about basketball than I do, that continue to sing his praises, indicate to me that they fully expect he is going to take the college basketball world by storm, and BYU will be a nationally renowned program, at least for this upcoming season, because there are going to be a ton of eyeballs on it. I'm excited to see this happen because if AJ really is that good, we are going to be treated to a season for the ages. I cannot wait to see what Kevin Young has got cooked up in terms of his offensive philosophy. How much does he allow a guy like AJ to play off of a Richie Saunders and the like, or how much are they playing off of AJ? That's the thing about this, and I've made this comparison myself, is you have a guy like Fran Fraschilla says that he looks like Kevin Garnett in terms of if he was a small forward. But I think back to, remember, if you're old enough to remember what happened with the Syracuse Orange in 2003 when Carmelo Anthony came in for his lone season in college basketball and just became the force that led the Orange to a national championship. It's not very often you see a freshman of that caliber, and we're talking Carmelo Anthony, a Hall of Famer in his own right, one of the best to ever do it. You put a lot of heat and a lot of pressure on a young man of that caliber, and you wonder how they're going to respond to it, because more often than not, they seem to have fallen short. But, man, if we are going to watch a Carmelo Anthony, a Kevin Garnett, insert NBA Hall of Fame type player into this conversation, what's the expectation level, and really what's the what do they have to match? Is it a Final Four? Is it a national championship? That is the concern I have, is that as we continue to kind of draw closer and closer, even though it feels like it's still a ways off to the start of the BYU basketball season, that maybe at some point we do jump the shark and we get out over our skis, and we're thinking way too highly of a team that has been put together by Kevin Young once again, that, as we saw last year, took some time to gel. I would expect the BYU will be better prepared just with the core of guys that return, like a Richie Saunders, like a Keba Keita, Brody Kozlowski, etc. Guys who are already in the program, they can talk to the other guys around them and say, hey, here's what we're looking at, and here's what you need to do to get up to speed and what Kevin Young is asking, Coach Young is asking for you to do. The hope is that they hit the ground running, because if they don't, there are going to be those naysayers out there who are going to hop on social media and pop off. And I fully expect there will be people popping off regardless, because the way BYU is scheduled this season, there are going to be losses. I'm just going to say it right now. If BYU makes an incredible run and it only has 2 or 3 losses the entire way, we're talking about, once again, just a season for the ages, one that we very well may never see again in our lifetimes. That would be the type of season it would be. I think Kevin Young's whole philosophy is, yes, I have got a squad that's a little bit in flux. We're going to have to put guys together and see what the combinations work early on in the season, and we will take lumps, because BYU kicks off the season against Villanova in Las Vegas. Then they've got the likes of Clemson. Then they play against UConn. The non-conference slate is going to absolutely test BYU, and then you jump into the Big 12 Conference, which, as we all know, is just a dog-eat-dog league that is absolutely ferocious. There are 0 games off. Even for the bottom feeders in that league, team-wise, have got some dudes who can torch you. And that's the thing that BYU, I think, if they're going to come through this league and come through this season, yeah, maybe they have 5, 6, 7, maybe as many as 10 losses going into the tournament. But the hope is, by the time that they emerge on the other side, the team that we saw in November versus the team we see in March, it's a battle-hardened, ready team. And at that point, the hope is that AJ DeBonsa, if he is that Carmelo Anthony, Kevin Garnett type, he is ready to really lead them through a season and through a tournament that requires 6 wins to win a national title. Let's say BYU flames out in the Sweet 16 again. Is it a failure? That'll be up to everybody's interpretation once we get to that point, because I feel like in many cases, no season really can be, I think, doled out that it's a success or failure based on the result of the season. I think you have to look at everything in its totality. Considering, I look at this past season, a Sweet 16, that was an absolutely masterful run for BYU, considering where they were at when they were 6, 7 games into Big 12 play. They were sub 500, and I felt like, man, could the wheels come off here? But to BYU and Kevin Young's credit, they rallied around one another and found a way to put together was a 9-game win streak down the stretch. And then, as I mentioned, made it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Let's say BYU does that again, and they do run into a buzzsaw in the Sweet 16 and fall. Would that be a failure? Would that be AJ DeBonsa fell short? Some people it may be. But I think the thing is, what guys like Fran Fraschilla are saying here is that they see something in this young man. They see greatness in him. If that greatness can translate over, once again, we're going to be treated to an absolutely incredible year ahead for the BYU basketball program. Yes, there's going to be an extra microscope or 36 on them because you're going to have national media who are tuning in literally every game. It doesn't matter what the opponent feels like for BYU. There will be people who tune in simply to watch AJ DeBonsa. Get used to watching NBA scouts and personnel, GMs and the like in Provo, Utah, because they will be scouting this kid extensively, speaking of AJ DeBonsa, and that extra spotlight that's on him, the hope is that it casts an extra light on guys like Richie Saunders along the way, Keba Keita, the other guys on the roster like Kennard Davis Jr., Dominic Diamande. They're all hoping that some of that luster, some of that limelight gets cast on them, and they find themselves on the NBA radar at some point. Everybody has a part to play in this, and the success or failure of this BYU basketball season, yeah, it probably will be determined in March. That's just kind of how college basketball is built to go. But man, if Fran Fraschilla is right, and we have got a Kevin Garnett-like player on our hands, man, get ready, folks. It is going to be a special, special season at the Marriott Center. All right. Another guy who had a really, really strong season, finished it off the right way, and now is awaiting his time to shine on the national stage when it comes to the NBA draft is Jaeger Demon. It is finally the week. It is here. He could kick off what Kevin Young has said will be an NBA factory. Well, what does that mean for BYU basketball? We'll try and make heads and tails of that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU that I'm hearing. Get it for $5 a month. That's the way to join the group. But the best part is you get a 14-day free trial. If you're interested in getting all the stuff I've got on BYU, join us today and you'll get that inside scoop. The link is in the show notes below. And the best part about it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. Not having to go to a message board or log on to a website to get that inside intel. It comes right to your phone and you can fire back with thoughts of your own. We have some great conversations in the insiders group with you, and it's a great way to support the show as well. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk about Jaeger Demon, because he is headed to New York City, to Brooklyn in particular, as he will be at the Barclays Center later on this week, Wednesday night, in fact, as he will hear his name called within the first 15 picks of the NBA draft. Now, Kevin Young, when he came to BYU, the introductory press conference, many of you saw it and heard it, he said that I plan on making this the most NBA-friendly program in college basketball. It's why guys like an AJ DeBonsa have signed on so readily to play for the BYU basketball program, because they believe that Kevin Young is doing this to get them to the next level. Well, Jaeger Demon is going to be the first of what hopefully is a long run here, or at least as long as Kevin Young's in Provo, Utah, a run of NBA talent who hears their name called, and Kevin Young's up hugging them, their family's hugging them. BYU administrators, guys like Travis Hanson, who I expect to be with Jaeger Demon this week, they're all there on national television, because when you have success in developing talent of that caliber and it goes out and here's its name called, speaking of the NBA draft, the fun part is that every one of those guys casts an extra spotlight back on BYU that make young men think, okay, Kevin Young's got it going here. Why am I not considering that program a little more heavily? Now, obviously, Jaeger, he's going to live his dream now, because he has dreamed his entire life of hearing his name called, walking out on that stage, giving a big bro hug to Adam Silver, holding up a jersey of whatever team's drafted him, and then he's off to play in the NBA. I wish him nothing but the best. Jaeger was an incredible story. Remember, he didn't have to come stateside. He could have easily stayed with Real Madrid, played this past season, and probably found himself in the NBA draft just the same. The one thing I think he took a gamble on is believing that Kevin Young could transform him as a prospect and raise his profile, because playing stateside versus playing overseas, it's a different deal. We all know that BYU may not be the Kentucky or the North Carolina or the Duke of college basketball, where they're under a glaring spotlight all the time. But what Jaeger Demon and the BYU basketball program did this year is they kind of took that spotlight and said, hey, you better shine it over here and take a little closer look at us. Cannon Catchings was supposed to be right there alongside Jaeger Demon. Didn't work out for him. You wish him nothing but the best as he now suits up for the North Carolina Tar Heels and hopefully can live his dream at some point down the line. But the thing is, Jaeger kicks off now what hopefully, as I mentioned, is kind of just a year by year. You're seeing 2 or 3 guys from BYU hearing their names called in the NBA draft. Are all of them going to be first-round prospects? Probably not. I would expect that Richie Saunders, even if he has a monster, what will be his senior season this year for BYU, very well could find himself in the second round of next year's NBA draft, but it still casts a spotlight back on what Kevin Young and the BYU basketball program are trying to do. They have got an NBA level staff. He's got guys who've worked in the G League, have worked with all these different organizations. He's got a general manager running things behind the scenes. He's got his brother doing his scouting, who has scouted high school and college prospects for decades at this point. They've got an NBA level nutritionist. They got NBA level trainers. They have remodeled the entire Marriott Center annex to be as NBA-esque as it possibly can be. What Kevin Young has built should not be ignored. And the hope is that in time, what he has going here just becomes this self-feeding machine that top 10, top 20 prospects just routinely are saying, I'm going to be a BYU Cougar. And this time next year, hopefully we're seeing AJ DeBonce up there as the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. And Richie Saunders, here's his name called, and maybe a Keba Keita, etc. They make their way up onto that stage and they get their chance to live their dream of hearing their name called from that podium. It's what basketball players want. They want to play at the highest levels possible. And BYU basketball, at least under Kevin Young, I think is going to get BYU as close to call it a G League or a developmental program as it can be. And along the way is also not going to sacrifice the winning that college basketball fans want. And speaking of Cougar fans in general, he obviously could be kind of building this where, hey, it's all about NBA. It's all about NBA. And the losing that could come alongside that could be there because guys can be kind of pulling their own weight, looking to get theirs. I think Kevin has blended it perfectly in terms of his ability to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run an NBA-style offense. We're going to play NBA-level defense. But at the same time, you have to work on your individual skills along the way. He's got all these assistant coaches, and they all have their individual responsibilities to work with each guy on this roster to hone their craft. And that's the type of stuff that the NBA has. You look at NBA benches, they're not unlike what BYU has behind they have like a first and a second and a third bench. Those are all developmental coaches, the guys who are studying analytics, and their whole job is to be in the gym at any hour that these players want to work on their game, to shag shots for them, to run sets, run pick and roll, everything that they want to do as a player to improve their skills. That's what those guys are there to do for these players. And that's what BYU's endeavored to do here. And the hope is that Jaeger Demon come up Wednesday night, that whether he's pick 6, whether he's pick 15, I think that he's going to go in that range. The hope is that once he gets up there, the talk is, hey, look at what this kid did. Look at what BYU did. Look what Kevin Young has built with the Brigham Young University men's basketball program, because that's the bigger point here is that Jaeger Demon, he's going to live his dream, but it kicks off. And I think it's proof in the pudding, or I guess proof in concept for a guy like Kevin Young to say, hey, you want to come play at BYU because I got that guy there. I got this guy there. This is what we can do for you. It's the proof and concept. That's the only thing that's kind of been lacking from his program. And Jaeger Devin just happens to be that guinea pig that they succeeded with. And I don't mean to diminish him at all, but the hope is that AJ DeBonce goes flying right by him, whether Jaeger is the 8th, 9th, 10th pick. We're seeing a guy like AJ DeBonce as the number 1 pick next year. And then it really, really gets going, because then people are going to pay even closer attention, saying, okay, what's BYU got going here? And how long is this going to go for? Is Kevin Young really that good of a coach? Well, sure looks like he is. And obviously getting guys to the next level and winning alongside as a byproduct doesn't hurt anybody's feelings along the way. All right. That is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. As always, thank you for y'all's support. Cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to support, rating, and reviewing, and subscribing to the show. Everything you guys do to help this show grow, it does not go unnoticed. So as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. Until tomorrow, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.